My name is Elena Rhodes, and from the outside, my childhood looked pristine like a family holiday card with no creases or fingerprints. We lived in Willow Creek, a quiet, upper-middle-class suburb just outside of Chicago. My father, Charles, was a finance executive who wore suits even on Saturdays, and my mother, Linda, ran a successful home decor business that filled our house with picture-perfect aesthetics. Our colonial-style home had white shutters, seasonal wreaths, and a two-car garage that housed more dreams for my younger sister, Sierra, than it ever did for me. Sierra was the light of the family, bubbly, photogenic, and always at the center of attention. 3 years younger than me, she had a way of turning every room into her stage. I, on the other hand, was the quiet one. The responsible one. The one who colored inside the lines and never gave anyone a reason to worry. I used to think that being good would naturally earn recognition, but it didn't. It only made me invisible. By the time I was in 2nd grade, I had already started to notice the imbalance. When Sierra got a role as a snowflake in her preschool holiday play, both my parents took the afternoon off work to sit in the front row with flowers. A week later, I won 1st place in our school's spelling bee, but only Grandma Marjorie showed up. My parents had a work emergency, though they made it to Sierra's friend's birthday party the next day without a hitch. It wasn't that they were cruel. It was that their attention had a center of gravity, and it always pulled toward Sierra. My achievements were expected, not celebrated. When I brought home straight A's, my dad would say, "That's my girl," without looking up from his laptop. Meanwhile, Sierra's B- in math warranted ice cream and a new iPad case for her efforts. I learned to stop expecting praise, but that doesn't mean I stopped needing it. My bedroom was the smallest in the house, with the same butterfly wallpaper I'd had since kindergarten. My parents promised to renovate it every year, but somehow Sierra's room got 3 full makeovers before I graduated high school. She had a canopy bed, smart lighting, even a vanity with LED mirrors. I had peeling wallpaper and a creaky desk from Craigslist. It wasn't just the physical space, it was emotional real estate too. Sierra took up all of it. At the dinner table, every story looped back to her volleyball team, her social drama, her newest fashion phase. I became a listener, nodding along, applauding from the sidelines of my own family. And somehow they never noticed I was fading. I used to lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering what I had done wrong, why being reliable, kind, and hardworking wasn't enough to earn a spotlight. But in our house, it seemed like being the quiet achiever was the fastest route to being forgotten. By the time I entered high school, the differences between Sierra and me weren't just felt, they were undeniable. Our lives, though shaped under the same roof, were playing out on entirely separate tracks. Sierra's path was lined with celebration, sparkle, and applause. Mine was paved with quiet expectations and muted acknowledgement. I told myself, for years, that maybe being the reliable one was a good thing. That maybe my parents didn't fuss over me because they trusted me. Maybe they didn't ask me what I needed because they believed I had it under control. I wore that logic like armor thin, brittle armor that cracked a little more each year. Sierra was the type of teenager you'd expect to see on a magazine cover for most likely to be famous. By 14, she already had a signature pose for selfies, a growing TikTok following, and a wardrobe that looked like it belonged on a fashion influencer. She lit up every room, and my parents never missed a moment. Volleyball games, front row, school dances, they hosted pre-party dinners, Instagram captions, written with her help. She had charm, yes, but more than that, she had their full attention, unbroken and unquestioning. I don't say this with resentment. I say it with clarity, after years of trying to convince myself it wasn't true. My life, meanwhile, revolved around schedules, responsibilities, and achievements that always seemed to go unnoticed. I wasn't trying to be the golden child, I just wanted to be seen. I joined the debate team, the yearbook committee, and the math club. I got straight A's, volunteered at the public library, and even started tutoring younger kids in algebra. My guidance counselor once told my parents during a parent-teacher conference, "Elena is exceptional. Quiet, but deeply capable." My mother smiled and nodded, then pivoted to ask about Sierra's volleyball coach and whether she could still qualify for nationals. The contrast came to a head on our respective 16th birthdays. I still remember mine vividly, not because it was special, but because of how painfully ordinary it was. That evening, we had dinner at a local Italian restaurant. Just the four of us. No decorations, no balloons. I got a used laptop for school, a pair of sneakers, and a polite pat on the back. My mom said, "You've always been practical, Elena. We knew you'd appreciate things you can actually use." I smiled and said thank you. What else could I do? But deep inside, a part of me sank further. There was no cake with my name and frosting. No friends invited. No photos for social media. Just a quiet dinner and a quiet girl who had long since stopped hoping for fanfare. Sierra's 16th was different. My parents rented out a lakeside clubhouse, hired a DJ, and catered a taco bar. There were 60 people there, half of whom I didn't even recognize. She got designer jewelry, a custom-made dress, and the big reveal at the end of the night, a brand new Honda Civic with a massive red bow on top. As she screamed and jumped into our parents' arms, I stood frozen with a paper plate of nachos in my hand, watching the scene like an outsider. When I finally asked my mom later why there was such a big difference between our birthdays, she responded without missing a beat. "Sweetheart, Sierra's more social. She needs that kind of confidence boost. You've always been secure in yourself." I didn't know how to respond to that. It wasn't the first time I'd heard it. It had become my parents' go-to excuse for the imbalance in how we were treated. Sierra needed more support. I was fine. I was independent. And in some cruel twist of logic, that meant she deserved more. What they didn't see was that my independence wasn't some inherent gift. It was a necessity. It was survival. I had learned to take care of myself because no one else was going to. By junior year, the differences bled into the fabric of our home. Sierra's bedroom went through 2 more full renovations, new wallpaper, new bed frame, a neon sign that spelled out her name in cursive. My room still had the butterfly wallpaper from when I was 6. My desk was wobbly, the lamp flickered, and I used a chair that left scratch marks on the hardwood floor. "We'll get to your room soon," my dad said each time I asked. "It's just that Sierra's priorities are more time-sensitive right now. She's growing into herself." So was I. But no one seemed to notice. I carried those unspoken hurts with me like invisible bruises. I didn't talk about them, not with my friends, not even with Grandma Marjorie. I just let them sit there, building up until I stopped feeling them in the moment and only noticed them in hindsight. School was my safe space. I excelled academically. Teachers liked me. I found purpose in planning events, leading group projects, and mentoring younger students. But even at award ceremonies, where I was often called up multiple times, my parents sometimes showed up late or left early. Once, during a senior honors night, my mom missed my speech because she had to drive Sierra to a friend's birthday dinner. "She promised we'd take her," she said, brushing it off. "You're always so good with words anyway. I'm sure you nailed it." I had. But it would have meant something to have her hear it. By the time college applications rolled around, I had stopped trying to impress them. I applied to scholarships behind closed doors, filled out financial aid forms on my own, and made Excel spreadsheets to track deadlines. I ended up getting into Northwestern with a generous scholarship package, and when I showed my parents the letter, they said, "Of course you did. You're Elena." Then my mom turned to Sierra and asked how her dance recital practice was going. I walked out of the room that night and cried in my car. Not because I wanted them to jump up and down, but because I wanted them to feel something. I wanted them to care. Instead, Sierra got into a less competitive private college with average grades and a letter of recommendation from our mom's friend. My parents paid her full tuition and bought her a MacBook and all new furniture for her dorm. When I left for college with my scholarship and a suitcase of thrift store basics, my dad gave me $100 and said, "Just in case." That was it. During those years, I internalized a dangerous belief. That love is conditional. That to be visible, you must be entertaining. That hard work means nothing if no one's clapping. I became obsessed with excellence, not because I craved success, but because I was terrified of being forgettable. It's hard to explain what it's like to grow up in a house where you're fed, clothed, and cared for on paper but emotionally malnourished. Where you're told you're so mature for your age, but no one ever asks how you're really doing. Where love feels like a prize reserved for the child who shines loudest, laughs hardest, and needs the most attention. Looking back now, I can see how deeply those teenage years shaped me not just as a daughter but as a woman. I learned to shrink myself, to minimize my needs, to stay quiet when overlooked. I learned to clap for others while wondering if anyone would ever clap for me. And the worst part? I blamed myself. I thought maybe I just wasn't lovable in the same way Sierra was. That maybe being quiet meant being unworthy. But I was wrong. I wasn't unlovable. I was just unseen. And somewhere deep down, I was beginning to feel a storm gathering, a storm of self-worth, anger, and the quiet realization that something had to change. I didn't know when it would break, but I knew eventually it would. College was supposed to be a fresh start, a clean slate where I could finally step out from behind Sierra's shadow. And for a while, it felt that way. I left Willow Creek and headed to Chicago with nothing but a scholarship letter, a used suitcase, and the quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, merit would finally mean something. I was enrolled in a competitive business program at Northwestern, sharing a modest off-campus apartment with 3 other scholarship students. We rotated grocery runs, split utility bills down to the cent, and celebrated small victories like passing a stats exam or surviving a group project from the floor of our shared living room. It was simple, frugal, and real. And it was mine. My parents helped me move in on day 1. Well, technically, they dropped me off at the curb. My dad had a client meeting downtown, and my mom had booked a hair appointment. They hugged me briefly, handed me a reusable shopping bag with starter groceries, and waved as I stood beside a pile of boxes. It didn't hurt at the time. I was used to it. But when I saw other parents hauling mini fridges upstairs, fluffing pillows, hanging fairy lights, I felt the first pang of being truly alone. Still, I threw myself into college life with determination. I worked 20 hours a week at the university library reshelving books, managing study rooms, learning the intricacies of the Dewey Decimal System far more intimately than I'd planned. It wasn't glamorous, but it helped cover what my scholarship didn't. I packed lunch most days, declined weekend outings when I couldn't afford them, and became an expert at stretching a paycheck. During holidays, I picked up extra shifts and stayed on campus while most students went home. My parents always said they admired my work ethic, but they never asked why I needed to work so much in the first place. Meanwhile, Sierra's college experience looked like an Instagram reel come to life. She attended a private liberal arts school in Michigan with no academic scholarships but full parental funding. She lived in a luxury apartment complex popular with sorority girls, where every unit had granite countertops, walk-in closets, and rooftop access. She joined a sorority, changed her major 3 times in 2 years, and maintained a solid 2.7 GPA. Her social media was a highlight reel of theme parties, brunch dates, and designer outfits, most of which were bought with the generous monthly allowance our parents deposited into her account. I used to stare at her photos while eating ramen in my kitchen, wondering what it felt like to have that kind of safety net, that kind of confidence, that kind of love. There were moments when I tried to tell myself it didn't matter, that I was better off being self-made, that independence was power. And yes, it was power. But it was also exhausting. There's a quiet grief in always having to be the strong one. In knowing that no one's coming to rescue you, in realizing that your value in the family seems tied more to how little you need than how much you've achieved. Each time I hit a milestone, I'd reach for that phantom thread of recognition. When I earned Dean's List 3 semesters in a row, I texted my parents. No reply. When I secured a marketing internship sophomore year beating out upperclassmen, I called home. My mom answered. But the first thing she said was, "Elena, can I call you back? Sierra just got a flat tire and she's freaking out." They never did call back. Still, I didn't stop hoping. A part of me, no matter how small, still wanted to believe that if I just worked hard enough, excelled enough, endured enough, they would see me. By senior year, I was running on fumes. Between coursework, my internship, and my library shifts, my life had become a careful balancing act of deadlines, caffeine, and delayed emotion. I had kept a 3.9 GPA, secured a job interview at a top-tier marketing firm in Denver, and was on track to graduate summa cum laude. I had done everything right. I had checked every box. This time, I told myself, this time will be different. Graduation would be the moment they showed up. Not just physically, but emotionally. I imagined my parents beaming in the crowd, clapping as I walked across the stage, telling friends, "That's our daughter. She's the one in honors cords." But 3 weeks before the ceremony, that illusion shattered. I had called home that morning to ask again if they could drive in for graduation. My car, a 15-year-old Toyota with more rust than paint, had started making an ominous clunking noise over 40 miles per hour. I didn't trust it to make the half-hour trip to campus. "I really don't want to risk driving it that far," I said cautiously over the phone. "I was hoping maybe you or Dad could pick me up." There was a pause. I could hear my father typing in the background. "Can one of your roommates take you?" he asked. "They're all in the ceremony too," I replied. "We have to be there early for lineup." My mother chimed in then, cheerful and distracted. "Oh, honey, did we tell you? Sierra made the dean's list this semester. We're so proud. She's been under so much stress with the new apartment lease and formal season." I swallowed hard. "That's great, Mom. But I really need to talk about transportation." "Let's talk about it later, okay?" she interrupted. "We're about to head out, actually. We're looking at something special for Sierra. Call you tomorrow?" They hung up before I could say another word. 2 days later, I stopped by their house to pick up some boxes I'd left in the basement. They weren't expecting me. As I stepped inside, I heard their voices echoing from the kitchen. "She's going to freak out," my dad was saying. "The white interior is gorgeous." "I know," my mom replied. "And the salesman said it'll be ready by Friday. Just in time for Elena's graduation. Sierra can drive it there and show everyone." I froze. "She's only a sophomore," my dad said, his tone mildly hesitant. "She's adjusted to college beautifully, and the Honda is getting old. Everyone in her sorority is getting new cars." I must have made a sound because they turned and saw me. The silence that followed was deafening. "We were going to surprise her," my mom said awkwardly, trying to cover the open laptop on the table. "It's for Sierra," I gathered. I said quietly. "What does my graduation have to do with her new car?" Before they could answer, the front door opened, and Sierra breezed in. "You won't believe it, Kylie got a Jeep Grand Cherokee. I told her." She stopped mid-sentence when she saw me. "Oh, hey Elena, what are you doing here?" What was I doing there? It was a question I'd been asking myself for years. As they unveiled the news white Tesla, premium interior, surprise delivery, I stood there, not even pretending to smile. They had bought my younger sister a luxury car to reward her for average grades and modest improvement. And somehow, they'd tied it to my graduation. As if Sierra driving everyone to the ceremony in style was the real milestone. As if the fact that I had no way of getting there on my own was irrelevant. I left without another word, my chest tight and hot with humiliation. Back in my apartment, I broke down in front of my roommate Nia. I sobbed not just for the Tesla, but for every moment that had led up to it, for every time I had been the afterthought, the second choice, the "you've always been so independent" child. "You're not crazy for being upset," Nia said, her voice firm with conviction. "You're not asking for too much. You're asking to be seen." And that was the night I realized I couldn't keep waiting for them to see me. If I wanted to be visible, I'd have to make myself seen, loudly, clearly, and maybe, for the first time in my life, unapologetically. The morning of my college graduation started not with excitement, but with a knot in my stomach, a familiar one. The kind that comes from knowing that something should be a celebration but somehow won't be. The kind that reminds you not to expect too much. Outside my window, the Chicago sky was overcast, soft gray clouds hung low, threatening a drizzle. I sat up in bed and stared at the navy dress hanging on my closet door, the one my mother had suggested I wear under my cap and gown. "Something classic," she'd said. "You don't want to stand out too much." Funny. I had spent 4 years feeling invisible, and now she was still advising me to fade into the background. I got ready in silence. My roommates had left early, their families picking them up with balloons and bouquets. I styled my hair with extra care, curled it the way my grandmother liked, applied a thin line of eyeliner, and fastened the gold necklace she gave me when I started college, a small pendant with the word worthy etched into it. She had said it was to remind me of something I often forgot. I slipped on the dress, the black graduation robe, the honors cords. I checked my phone, no messages from my parents. No, we're proud of you. No, we're on our way. Just silence. At 9 a.m., I stepped outside into the cool air and started the 3-block walk to the train station. My flats clicked against the damp pavement. I kept one hand on my graduation cap to stop it from blowing off in the wind. Cars passed by, many filled with families headed to the same ceremony. I imagined them chatting, laughing, maybe even arguing over directions, but at least they were together. At the station, I waited under a concrete overhang as a light rain began to fall. The platform was mostly empty, save for an elderly man reading a newspaper and a young mother with a toddler in a stroller. A moment later, an older woman joined me on the bench, holding a large floral umbrella and wearing a church hat. She smiled at me kindly. "Graduation day?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," I replied. "And you're taking the train?" "My family had other plans," I said, trying not to sound bitter. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "I took 2 buses to my nursing school graduation in 1962. My parents were busy with my brother's baseball game. Some things don't change." Her voice was gentle but sharp. "But that doesn't mean you don't deserve to be celebrated." I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from crying. Her words hit harder than I expected. The train arrived with a low screech, and I boarded along with a few strangers who offered polite congratulations after noticing my gown. One even insisted I take her seat. The small gestures of kindness from people who didn't even know me were more than I'd received from my own family that morning. About 10 minutes into the ride, my phone buzzed. A message from Sierra. "OMG, the Tesla is amazing. I'm driving everyone to your ceremony. Can't wait for people to see it." Attached was a photo of her in a tight white dress, posing with the Tesla like it was a trophy, while my parents beamed beside her. Not one word about me. I didn't reply. I turned off my phone and looked out the window, watching the city pass in a blur. For a moment, I let the tears fall freely, smudging my makeup. Not just for today, but for every forgotten science fair, every overlooked birthday, every whispered, "We're proud of you," that never came. When I arrived on campus, the crowd outside the arena was already forming. Parents carried flowers, siblings waved signs, and graduates posed for pictures in clusters. I saw Nia waving from across the plaza, her arms outstretched. "There you are," she shouted, running to me. "I was worried you'd be late." I nodded, trying to smile. "Did you seriously take the train? In the rain?" "Family tradition," I muttered dryly. She stared at me for a long second, then pulled me into a tight hug. "You're not alone today, Elena. I promise." Inside the graduate assembly area, the energy buzzed with excitement. Students adjusted their caps, snapped selfies, exchanged nervous laughter. I found my spot among the business majors and tried to focus on the moment. But when I glanced toward the auditorium's entrance, I saw them. Sierra, in a white cocktail dress that screamed, "Look at me," walked in ahead of my parents, leading them like a celebrity with her entourage. My mom was holding a branded Tesla tote bag. My dad had a VIP parking pass dangling from his lanyard. They weren't there to see me. They were there to be seen. I looked away. When the ceremony started and our names were called one by one, I rose and walked toward the stage. I didn't expect cheers, but as I stepped onto the platform, I heard a familiar voice cut through the crowd. "That's my girl, go Elena." I turned and spotted my grandmother standing in the back row, leaning on her cane, eyes brimming with pride. Beside her were Nia's parents and 2 of my coworkers from the library, holding a handmade sign. "We see you, Elena." It shattered me in the best way. I accepted my diploma with shaking hands, my chest tight with emotion. I had worked 4 years for this, and in that one moment, seen, cheered, held, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Enough. Afterward, in the courtyard, families swarmed for pictures. I spotted my parents and Sierra by the Tesla, posing like they were in a magazine ad. I approached slowly, knowing I had to face it, had to say something. "There you are," my mom said brightly. "We've been looking for you. Let's get a quick picture by the car before we head to brunch." My heart slammed in my chest. "No," I said. Just one word, but it echoed louder than a scream. "No what?" my dad asked, glancing at his watch. "No, I won't take photos by Sierra's Tesla. Not on my graduation day. Not after I took the train here, soaked in rain, while you celebrated her again." A stunned silence fell. "Elena, don't be dramatic," my mother started. "Dramatic?" I cut in, my voice rising. "You bought her a luxury car for finishing sophomore year with a C average, and left me to figure out how to get to the biggest moment of my life by myself. And you think I'm being dramatic?" Sierra looked confused. "I didn't know you took the train." "Of course you didn't," I said. "No one asked. No one even thought to ask." My grandmother stepped forward then. "Enough," she said, her voice firm despite her frailty. "You've overlooked Elena long enough. Her achievement today, what she's overcome to get here, is worth more than any damn Tesla." My mother looked like she wanted to cry. My father didn't speak. I turned to Nia, who had been waiting nearby. "I'm heading to dinner with people who wanted to celebrate me today." Then, for the first time in 22 years, I walked away from them unapologetically. That evening I sat alone on my bed, still in my graduation gown, the hem damp from the morning rain, and the cuffs creased from hours of movement. The cap lay on the floor beside me like a forgotten symbol of something I had fought so hard for but never truly celebrated by the people who should have been first in line to do so. My phone buzzed with notifications, a dozen missed calls, texts from my mom, voicemails from my dad, a few from Sierra, most of them variations of, "We need to talk." I turned the phone face down on the nightstand and closed my eyes. Then came the knock at the door. At first I didn't move. I hoped it would pass. But the knocking came again, more insistent this time, followed by the unmistakable sound of my father's voice. "Elena, we know you're home. Please open the door." I took a deep breath, bracing myself, and walked to the door with heavy feet. When I opened it, my parents stood there, dressed for comfort now. My mother in flats and a long cardigan. My father with his shirt untucked. They looked smaller somehow, like they'd lost the height that their self-assurance once gave them. Their eyes scanned my modest apartment, the peeling paint, the stack of library books, the single bouquet of flowers Grandma Marjorie had handed me after the ceremony. My mother stepped in first. "We've been trying to reach you all day." I said flatly, gesturing for them to sit. "What do you want?" They exchanged glances and sat stiffly on the edge of the couch like guests in a stranger's home. My dad cleared his throat. "That scene you caused today, Elena." I held up a hand. "Don't." His mouth closed, his brow furrowing. My mother spoke next. We want to understand what's going on. Why you acted that way in front of everyone." I stared at them in disbelief. "You want to understand? After 22 years of treating me like a background character in my own life?" My father frowned. "That's not fair. We've supported you." "No," I snapped. "You supported Sierra. I got leftovers. I got silence. I got you'll be fine and you're independent and she needs us more." "Sweetheart?" My mother started. "Don't call me that." I cut in, my voice shaking. Today wasn't about the Tesla. It wasn't even just about the train. It was about everything that came before. The birthdays, the performances, the report cards, the scholarships you barely acknowledged while Sierra got standing ovations for passing chemistry. "We didn't mean—" my dad began. "That's the problem," I interrupted. "You never meant to make me feel invisible. But you did. Over and over, and I convinced myself it was okay. That being the strong one meant I didn't need support. But it wasn't okay. It hurt. It hurts. For the first time, their faces shifted, not defensiveness, not confusion, guilt. Real, raw guilt. My mom's eyes brimmed with tears. My dad looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "I kept things," I said quietly, standing and crossing to a small shoebox on my bookshelf. I brought it to the coffee table and began laying items out one by one: a faded birthday card with a generic message, a picture of Sierra's sweet 16 party where I stood in the back holding the gift bags, a school program from my senior awards night, creased and unsigned, a screenshot of my college acceptance letter, one I'd never printed because no one asked for it. And finally, a folded train ticket from that morning. "This is my scrapbook," I said, "of moments where I was supposed to feel seen and didn't." My parents sat in stunned silence. My mother reached toward the train ticket, then pulled her hand back like it had burned her. "How long have you felt this way?" she asked finally. I stared at her. "Since Sierra was 5, and you missed my spelling bee to take her to a play date." My dad rubbed his face with both hands. "We thought you were fine." "No," I said softly. "I was quiet." "That's not the same." Before anyone could respond, another knock sounded at the door. I opened it to find Grandma Marjorie, winded but determined. "I thought you might need backup," she said, brushing past me. When she saw my parents, her expression hardened. "Well," she said, scanning the scene. "So, we're finally having this conversation." My mother straightened. "Mom, please." "No," Grandma interrupted. "You don't get to steer this one, Linda. I sat through years of watching you repeat the same pattern your father did to you and Carol. And I hoped you'd break the cycle. But here we are." My mom stiffened. "This is different." "It's not," Marjorie snapped. "You were always the golden child, charming, confident, and your father adored you for it. Carol? She was studious, quiet, like Elena, and she spent years thinking she had to earn love by being perfect. Just like this one." My dad looked at my mom, clearly stunned. "You never told me that." "There's a lot she never told you," Marjorie said. "Like how she blamed herself for the way her father treated Carol. And now she's passed that legacy to her own daughters." My mother's lip trembled. "I didn't mean to. I thought I was giving Elena space. Independence. The kind I never had." "She didn't need space," Marjorie said, her voice softening. "She needed parents." For a long while no one spoke. Then quietly my father said, "I didn't realize. I really didn't. I always saw you as the one who didn't need us. That was a mistake. A big one." I folded my hands in my lap. "I'm not saying you're bad people. I'm saying you were bad at being my parents." My mother let out a choked sound and buried her face in her hands. My dad placed a tentative hand on her back. "How do we fix this?" he asked, looking at me. "You don't," I replied. "Not overnight, but you acknowledge it. You stop pretending like this was just a miscommunication. You let me set boundaries. And you accept that I might need space not because I don't love you, but because I need to learn how to love myself without constantly being compared to Sierra." "What kind of boundaries?" my dad asked, cautious. "No more Tesla updates. No more sudden brunches where I'm expected to perform polite daughter duties while you gush over Sierra's growth. No more calling only when you need something. And if you want a relationship with me, it's going to be on equal terms." They both nodded slowly. "And one more thing," I added. "I got a job interview in Denver next week. If it works out, I'll be moving." My mom blinked. "But that's so far." "Not really," I said. "If you want to visit, you will. If you want to keep in touch, you'll find a way. The ball's in your court now." Grandma Marjorie placed a hand on my shoulder. "Well said." As my parents stood to leave, my mother paused. "Elena," she said softly, "I know it doesn't mean much now, but I am proud of you. I just wish I had told you sooner." I nodded. "Me too." They left quietly, the door closing with a soft click. Marjorie and I sat for a while longer in the quiet, drinking tea. The air felt lighter, though my chest was still heavy with everything that had surfaced. I knew we hadn't fixed it all. You don't undo years of pain in one evening. But for the first time, I felt like they'd really listened, like the dam had cracked, and something real might finally flow through. And that finally was enough to begin. The days that followed my graduation felt strangely quiet, like the silence after a storm. Not peaceful exactly, but hushed, like life was holding its breath. The confrontation with my parents had left a rawness in its wake, a vulnerability that settled into my apartment like a soft fog. Nothing had been magically resolved, but something had undeniably shifted. For the first time in 22 years, I had been heard. And that small miracle, as fragile as it felt, carried weight. I didn't speak to my parents again for the rest of that weekend, but Grandma Marjorie stayed close. She checked in every morning, brought me soup even when I said I wasn't hungry, and gently encouraged me to rest. She was the kind of presence that didn't demand anything. She just was warm, unwavering, the one person who had seen me clearly long before I found the words to speak for myself. One afternoon, while she sat in my kitchen knitting, and I organized paperwork for my upcoming job interview, she glanced up and said, "You know, there's a difference between walking away and walking towards something." I looked at her, puzzled. "You didn't just leave that courtyard, Elena. You chose yourself. And that's not running. That's rising." The words hit me somewhere deep, in a place that had always been waiting for someone to give me permission. "I don't know how to be without trying to earn someone's approval," I admitted. "I've done that my whole life." "You unlearn it," she said simply. "Moment by moment, choice by choice." And that's what I tried to do. I canceled dinner with distant relatives who only ever talked about Sierra. I turned off notifications on the family group chat, where Sierra was already planning her next party. I focused on my interview prep, worked on my resume, practiced answering tough questions. For the first time, I wasn't doing these things to impress anyone. I was doing them because I wanted this life, my life, to be mine. Then, 3 days after the graduation ceremony, Sierra texted me. "Can we talk? Just us." I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but curiosity and maybe hope got the better of me. I agreed to meet her at a nearby park. She showed up wearing a hoodie, and no makeup, something I hadn't seen since she was 14. She looked real, human, nervous. "I heard everything," she said, sitting next to me on the bench. "At your apartment." I was in the car at first, but then followed Mom and Dad upstairs and listened outside the door. I didn't respond. I just waited. "I didn't realize," she continued, picking at the edge of her sleeve. "I knew you got treated differently, I'm not blind, but I didn't know it hurt you that much. I thought you didn't care. I thought you were above all of it." I'm not above wanting to matter," I said quietly. "I just got good at pretending." She looked at me, her expression tight with something like shame. "You're right about the Tesla. It feels gross now. I told Mom and Dad I don't want it." That surprised me. "Really?" "Yeah," she said. "I mean, maybe I did want it. At first. But now it just feels like a symbol of everything that's wrong with our family. So I told them to return it and donate the money to something that actually means something." I didn't know what to say. She shifted on the bench. "I've been awful to you. You were a kid, responding to the dynamics Mom and Dad created," I said, surprising myself with how calm I felt. "We both were." She nodded slowly. "I'm not asking for a hug or forgiveness or anything. I want to do better. I want to be your sister. Not the spotlight hog. Not the golden child. Just Sierra. Is that even possible?" I paused, then said, "I think we'd have to figure out who we are outside of those roles first. But I'm open to trying." We sat in silence for a while, watching squirrels dart between tree trunks, kids chasing each other across the grass. And for the first time in years, our silence wasn't strained. It was tentative, yes, but it wasn't hostile. Maybe that was enough to start something new. The following week, I had my interview with Horizon Marketing in Denver. I wore the navy dress again, this time with pride, and brought copies of my resume and a clean leather portfolio. The office was modern and bright, the people sharp and focused. The interview went well. Better than well. When the hiring manager shook my hand and said, "We'll be in touch soon," I left the building with a lightness in my chest that had nothing to do with them and everything to do with me. I had shown up fully, unapologetically, and that alone was a win. 2 days later, the offer came through. A junior marketing associate position, competitive salary, room for growth, and a relocation stipend. I cried when I read the email, not because I doubted myself, but because I finally felt what it was like to be chosen on my own merit. No strings, no comparison, no compromise. When I told Grandma Marjorie, she clapped her hands together and exclaimed, "I knew it!" She insisted we celebrate with cake and tea, even though it was barely 10 a.m. "You're moving forward," she said. And that's a beautiful thing. Packing up my apartment was both cathartic and strange. Every item into a box felt like a small goodbye, not just to the space, but to the version of myself who had lived here. The quiet girl who worked too hard, asked for too little, and thought she had to prove her worth to be loved. On my last day in the apartment, my parents and Sierra showed up with lunch and moving boxes. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was effort. They helped me label things, wrap fragile items, carry furniture down 3 flights of stairs. The conversations were still awkward at times, pauses too long, topics too safe, but there was sincerity in the way my dad asked if I needed extra packing tape, and in how my mom offered to drive the SUV behind my car all the way to Denver. Before we left, Sierra pulled me aside and handed me a small cardboard box. Inside was a faded blue ribbon, the one I had won at the science fair in 4th grade. The one my parents missed. The one I thought had vanished forever. "I found it in the old storage closet," she said. "I don't know why I kept it. Maybe part of me always knew it was important." I held the ribbon in my hands for a long moment. "It was," she smiled. "Then it belongs to you." "Oh." That night, we arrived in Denver and unloaded the last of my things into my new apartment, a tiny studio with creaky floors, thin walls, and a view of the mountains if you squinted from the bathroom window. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. Entirely mine. My parents stood in the doorway awkwardly, unsure of how to say goodbye. My mother hesitated, then pulled me into a hug longer, tighter, more real than any hug I could remember. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. I should have said that more often. I swallowed hard but didn't cry. "Thank you," I said. And I meant it. After they left, I sat on the floor among boxes and unopened dishes and stared out the window as the last light faded from the sky. I checked my phone, no new texts from my parents, no emergencies, no last-minute guilt trips. Just a message from Marjorie. "How does it feel to be exactly where you're meant to be?" I smiled and typed back. Like the beginning of something important. And for the first time in my life, I didn't just feel free, I felt whole. Moving to Denver wasn't just about starting a new job. It was about reclaiming space, physical, emotional, and spiritual, that had never fully belonged to me. My new apartment was small, maybe 500 square feet if I was generous, but it felt enormous in its freedom. The walls were bare, the kitchen tiny, and the radiator made strange clanking noises at night, but it was mine. Every box I unpacked felt like a declaration. This is where I begin again. My first week at Horizon Marketing was a blur of introductions, software tutorials, and adjusting to the rhythm of a professional office. I was nervous but prepared. Years of overcompensating had made me detail-oriented, adaptable, and unshakably responsible. My supervisor, Carmen, seemed both intimidating and fair, someone who respected initiative more than small talk, which suited me perfectly. It didn't take long for me to realize something strange. No one here knew me as Sierra's sister, or as the quiet, dependable child who made life easy for everyone else. I was just Elena, not a supporting character, not the invisible daughter, just me. It was disorienting at first, being seen without the old context, but gradually, it became liberating. I explored Denver on weekends, sometimes with coworkers, sometimes alone. I found a tiny used bookstore, 2 blocks from my apartment, a coffee shop where the barista remembered my order by day 3, and a walking trail that offered a view of the mountains if you climbed high enough and didn't mind a bit of sweat. For the first time, silence wasn't loneliness. It was peace. I could breathe. I could hear myself think, I could live without waiting for approval to do so. Back in Chicago, the silence from my parents was cautious. They texted more often than before, though the messages were still measured, a little awkward, like they were learning a new language, one built on respect rather than assumption. My father sent me a photo of a book he thought I'd enjoy. My mother forwarded a recipe for lentil soup. Just in case you ever want to cook something easy and warm after a long day. I didn't always respond immediately, but I noticed. And I appreciated the effort. Then one Saturday afternoon, about 3 weeks after my move, my dad called. Not texted, called. I was curled up on the couch, rereading a favorite novel, when the phone buzzed with his name. I hesitated before answering. "Hi, Dad," I said, cautious. "Hey, kiddo," he replied, his voice gentler than I remembered. "I'm not interrupting, am I?" "Number, just reading." There was a pause. I was wondering if you'd be open to having lunch. Just the two of us. I thought maybe I could come to Denver for the weekend." I sat up straighter. In my entire life, I couldn't remember him asking to spend one-on-one time with me. "Sure," I said slowly. "Yeah, I'd like that." He flew in the following Saturday. We met at a local cafe. I'd grown fond of nothing fancy, just good food and a view of a nearby park. At first, conversation was stiff. He asked about work, I answered politely. He asked about the apartment. I described it. Then, midway through a shared slice of chocolate cake, he set his fork down and looked at me like he was seeing me clearly for the first time. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began. "About how we treated you. And I want you to know, I hear it now. I really do." I didn't say anything, unsure where he was going. "I think I assumed that because you were so capable you didn't need us. But that wasn't fair to you, and I'm sorry I didn't show up the way I should have. Not just at your graduation, but all the times before." A lump formed in my throat. "Thank you," I said quietly. "That means more than you know." He smiled, though his eyes were misty. "I'd like to help with your moving expenses. I know you probably handled it already, but I want to support this next chapter. If you'll let me." At first I wanted to say no, to prove that I didn't need help. But I remembered something Grandma Marjorie had told me the night I moved. Sometimes letting someone show up is the bravest thing you can do. So I nodded. I'd appreciate that. After lunch, we walked through the park, talking more easily about nothing urgent, nothing emotional, just life. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't trying to impress him. I was just existing, and that was enough. The following week, my mother called. Not to ask for anything, not to guilt-trip me, but just to talk. "I looked up neighborhoods in Denver," she said brightly. "Did you know the Baker District used to be all warehouses? Now it's got art galleries and wine bars, very trendy." I laughed. "Yeah, and completely out of my price range." "Well, when I visit," she said, "we'll check it out together. I mean, if you'd want me to visit." There was vulnerability in her voice I'd rarely heard before. "I'd like that," I said. And I meant it. Our conversation was light weather, furniture shopping, television shows, but underneath it was something new, effort. My mom wasn't perfect. But for the first time in my adult life, she wasn't centering herself in every interaction. She was reaching out. Maybe ungracefully, but she was trying. Even Sierra had changed in small but meaningful ways. She sent me photos of her volunteering at a local food drive with her sorority, not as a flex but with a caption that simply said, "Trying something different." She even mailed me a small care package, a candle that smelled like vanilla and cinnamon, a handwritten note that read, "In case Denver gets cold. And in case I never said it before, you've always been the sister I looked up to." I just didn't know how to show it. I cried when I read it. Healing didn't come in one sweeping moment. It came in small fragments, a text answered, a phone call made, a missed birthday finally remembered. It wasn't perfect. I still had moments of hesitation, still caught myself bracing for disappointment. But I was learning that boundaries and forgiveness could coexist. That I didn't have to cut people out completely to protect my peace. I just had to define how close they were allowed to get. One Sunday morning, I met Grandma Marjorie for brunch. She had flown in for the weekend, refusing to miss the chance to see her graduate in her new life. As we sipped coffee at a sunny patio table, she took my hand and said, "You've come so far, Elena. Not just in miles, but in truth." I smiled. Sometimes I wonder if it's really happening. If it's really different. It is, she said firmly. Because you are. And once you start living as someone who knows her worth, the world has to adjust. I let her words settle deep in my chest, because for the first time in my life, I believed them. The next day, back at work, Carmen pulled me aside. "We're putting together a pitch team for a major account," she said. "I want you on it. I've been watching how you operate. You're sharp, focused, quiet power." Quiet power. I thought about all the years I was told that my silence meant invisibility. That being dependable meant I didn't matter. And now, here was someone seeing that same quiet as a strength. "Yes," I said. "I'd love to be part of it." As I walked back to my desk, sunlight streamed through the office windows, casting long lines across the carpet. I paused, just for a second, and closed my eyes. I had fought to be seen. Now, finally, I saw myself. The day I unpacked the last box in my apartment, I stood in the middle of my new living room surrounded by quiet. Not emptiness quiet. The kind that follows closure, not abandonment. I lit the vanilla candle Sierra had sent me and opened the leather-bound journal gifted by my coworkers back at the library. On the first page, in neat handwriting, they had written, "Your worth is not determined by others' ability to see it." I traced those words with my fingertips and let myself breathe them in, not as a quote to admire, but as a truth I had earned. So much had changed since that rainy morning at the train station. I'd stood alone in my cap and gown, drenched and shivering, wondering if my family would ever see me. But the truth is, the most important recognition came not from them but from within. The moment I stopped begging to be seen was the moment I began to see myself. I still get texts from my parents, updates about their lives, awkward but earnest check-ins about mine. There are no grand transformations, no storybook endings, just small shifts. An invitation to brunch that doesn't include Sierra. A postcard with a handwritten, "Thinking of you." A phone call that ends with, "We're proud of you." They're trying. And I've stopped expecting perfection in place of accountability. That's healing. I think learning to see effort where there used to be absence. Sierra and I talk now, in real ways. She's not just the golden child anymore. She's a young woman trying to reframe her own story, and I can respect that without diminishing my own. We are no longer rivals orbiting our parents' attention. We're two adults learning how to be sisters from scratch. It's clumsy, and sometimes silent, but it's honest. I walk to work now through Denver's tree-lined streets, a cup of coffee in hand, sunlight warming my skin. Most people passing by wouldn't guess how many battles I've fought just to feel like I belong to myself. But I carry those victories quietly, in the confidence in my voice, the ease in my stride, the calm in my gut when I answer the phone and don't brace for guilt. This isn't a story about revenge or justice. It's a story about returning to yourself after years of being told you weren't enough. It's about standing in your truth, even when your voice shakes. And it's about choosing the life that sees you clearly, instead of begging the one that never could. I may have taken the train to my graduation, but I'm driving my own life now on roads I choose, in a direction that belongs to me. And that, more than anything else, is the graduation gift I'll never forget. If there's one thing I've learned from my story, it's this. Just because you're strong doesn't mean you don't deserve to be seen. I spent most of my life being the dependable one. The one who didn't need the spotlight. The one who made things easier for everyone else. And for a long time, I mistook that silence for strength. I thought if I just worked harder, achieved more, stayed quieter, maybe someone would notice. But they didn't. And eventually, I had to notice myself. I had to understand that being overlooked wasn't a reflection of my value, it was a reflection of what others chose to see. My journey taught me that it's not selfish to want to be acknowledged, and it's not wrong to set boundaries with people who only see your usefulness, not your worth. The moment I stopped trying to prove I mattered and started living like I already did, that was the beginning of everything. So if you've ever felt like the invisible one, I want you to know. Your light isn't dim. It's just waiting for you to recognize it. And the day you do, that's the day your real life begins.